Okay, good morning. I'm back to Sanhedrin, double X-rated Sanhedrin right now. So who can remember what the homework was for last week? Yes, Julia. Head girl Julia will remember the homework.
I'm really sorry, I'm embarrassed to do this. It was to work out why Absalom's sister could marry him if her mother was, if they were full brother and sister,
Yes.
and her mother was Jewish.
Yeah. Okay. So to put it perhaps a little more clearly, the question was this. We have said that Tamar, who was raped by her half-brother Amnon, tried to get out of the situation by saying to Amnon, go and ask the king if we can marry one another, and therefore you won't need to rape me. And the question the Gemarah asks is, how could that possibly be their brother and sister? And we said that the only way that that could work is if for some reason or other Tamar was not considered to be a daughter of David legally. And the Gemarah says, well, she must have been the daughter of a Ashes Yafat To'ar, from the daughter of the beautiful captive. By the way, yesterday at the Yemei Iyun Tanakh, not only did I see that advert that I sent you on the group for this book about the Eshet Yafat To'ar, but one of the lectures that I heard, one of the absolutely brilliant lectures, I heard 5 brilliant lectures yesterday. One of them touched significantly on Parashat Ki Teitzei. It was a lecture by Rabbi David Foreman, who, if you haven't ever heard of him, you need to. He's absolutely brilliant. And he compared the Parashat Ki Teitzei, where we speak about this idea of the beautiful captive. He compared it to Megillat Esther, and he brought 25 different comparisons. It was absolutely genius. I couldn't even begin to repeat it. But anyway, I digress. So,
sorry, I asked you about the book, but I thought they were selling the book there, but they weren't.
No, it was a link on Amazon. But I'm going to order it for you because I'm going to.
I can order my own. It's fine. I just thought they might have been selling it there, and I'd get a signed copy. But
no, they weren't. They were just advertising it.
Thank you.
Okay, so we said that Tamar must have been the daughter of an Eshet Yafat To'ar, and the reason she's not considered Jewish, no, the reason she's not considered David's daughter is that she was conceived prior to her conversion, which we spoke about because there was an opinion that said that the soldiers were allowed to cohabit with this woman once on the battlefield, i.e. rape, before they went through the process of conversion with bringing her into the house and shaving her head and growing her nails and taking her clothes of her captivity off and mourning for her mother and father, everything that's spoken about in Parashat Ki Teitzei. And none of us liked that whole idea. And I'm suspecting that this book that Julia and I are going to read will throw some more light onto that. But for the time being, we have a conundrum because we have a halacha that says that and this is a halacha which is accepted by every opinion, and that is that a woman who converts to Judaism whilst pregnant, the child born is fully Jewish in all regards. And that is a very straightforward Shulchan Aruch. If you want to know exactly where it is, I've got the source here. Give me a second and I'll tell it you. Where did I put it now? There it is. It is in Shulchan Aruch. Yoredea 268. Gioret sheyalda acha shenit gaira. A convert who gives birth after she has converted, havlad, the child, Yisrael is a Jew, is considered as a Jew, l'chol davar, in all respects. No argument about that. So, if she's a Jew in all respects, Tamar, how can she be said not to be the daughter of David? If she is the daughter of David, then she can't marry Amnon. And the homework was in two parts. Number one, how do you square that issue that we are saying that she wasn't really a daughter of David because she was conceived to a non-Jewish woman? Well, it doesn't make any difference what she was conceived at. It's what she was born as we've just seen in the halacha. So how do we square that? And the second part of the question is what Julia just said, which is that Tamar had an older brother called
Absalom.
Avshalom, correct. Absalom in English, Avshalom in Hebrew. And he is considered a son of David, l'chol davar. How do we know that? Because he was considered as a possibility for the king, to be the king. And in fact, he rebelled against David and proclaimed himself to be king. And when he was killed, by the way, who killed him?
Oh, David's nephew.
Correct. Name?
Noah? No.
Yeah, Yoav. By the way, yesterday again, I heard probably the best of all of the 5 lectures was by a lady called Dr. Nechama Price. Anybody ever come across her? Well, we need to find, neither had I, but we need to find out more about her. She was brilliant. She spoke for an hour and did not, I mean, at rapid pace. It was like being in a machine gun fire. She didn't pause for breath. She spoke about Yoav for an hour. It would take me months and months and months to go through what she went through in an hour. It was absolutely phenomenal. And actually, what I will do, Bli Neder, is when the recordings come out from this, I will try and share it with the Tanakh group, because we've learned a lot of what she said. We have learnt, but she brought all sorts of different stuff. It was absolutely fabulous. Anyway, Yoav killed Avshalom. Avshalom is considered a full son of David, and he's older than Tamar. So we can't say that Tamar was born before Ma'acha, the mother, converted, and Avshalom was afterwards, because Avshalom is older. So how are we going to square that? So we've got 2 difficulties from last week that we need to square.
Jonathan.
Now then, yes,
Sorry.
yes.
Can we not say, did we not agree that David had 400 children? And we agreed, I might be wrong, that these were the children of the soldiers. Well, maybe she was a daughter of one of these soldiers. So she wasn't a full daughter.
Okay, well, that would mean she wouldn't be a daughter at all. And there would be absolutely no question over it.
But if he's taking them as his children.
I see what you mean. So you're saying that she wasn't really a child anyway. She was one of these 400 who is considered as if she's David's child, because she was the child of one of the soldiers, and therefore in one respect she's like David's child, and therefore she's like okay, but that doesn't make her a half sister of Amnon. That's the problem with that explanation. What we seem to know, Jackie, is that Amnon and Tamar's mother was Ma'acha.
Okay.
So that was a very good try, but I don't think it works, because we know that they were half sisters, and Ma'acha was the mother of Avshalom and Tamar. Yes, Julia.
What if the mother hadn't converted when Avshalom when the brother was born, and he converted after? Doesn't it work?
No, because when you are converted, or you are reborn, and you lose all halachic contact with your biological parents. Okay, So
That doesn't work.
so that doesn't work. Yeah.
I'd like to know, please, is it possible for somebody who's converted to unconvert? In other words, I mean, people do convert from Judaism to Christianity. This woman was an idol worshipper, and from what I understand, she never stopped worshipping idols. Could she have, between the birth of Avshalom and Tamar, have given up Judaism?
Ooh, now that's an interesting concept. Now then, what let's just explore this a bit more, because this is really interesting what Julia has raised. There was a bit of a controversy a few years ago here in Israel. I don't know if any of you remember. Michael, you're nodding. What am I thinking of?
Well, somebody converted under Orthodoxy, and then she it was still Jewish as far as she was concerned, but didn't keep the halacha, Shabbat, etc., and they unconverted her, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. Now, I don't remember the details of which Beis Din it was now off the top of my head, but there was an Orthodox Beis Din here in Israel that tried to annul the conversion retrospectively. Tried to say that this woman who had converted had actually pulled the wool over the eyes of the Beis Din, and at the time of the conversion, she did not believe in Hashem. She did not accept the Torah on herself, and therefore, lemafreya, as we say in Hebrew, retroactively, not retrospectively, retroactively, it was not a kosher conversion. Now, we've used this trick in the past with weddings to prevent mamzerut, this idea of retroactive annulment. Do you know what I'm talking about? So let me explain to you about retroactive annulment. So in our case here that we're talking about, and this was a case, Lamar said, this happened a few years ago. This rabbi tried to say that when woman A converted, she was a fraud. We didn't know it at the time. She pulled the wool over our eyes. She pretended that she accepted the Torah, but she never accepted the Torah in the first place. And therefore, retroactively, that was a false conversion. And therefore, she was never converted at all in the first place. Now, let's assume that she had children, this woman. I don't know if she did. I can't remember the details. Let's say she had children after the conversion. That then throws into question the Jewish status of those children. Now, the retroactive annulment of her conversion was not accepted by the chief rabbinate, if I'm not mistaken. They said you can't do that. You can't retroactively annul it. Now, the reason you can't retroactively annul it, of course, is that you are opening up there an incredible Pandora's box, which you don't want to go to. You do not want to go down that road, because if you go down that road, at what point on somebody's religious journey do you say, okay, well, she's no longer wearing a sheitel, or she's no longer, covering her ankles with her clothes, and therefore she's now clearly not accepting the Torah, and therefore she blah blah blah. You get my point, right? It's an absolute Pandora's box that you don't want to go into. So the chief rabbinate, quite correctly, in my opinion, said you cannot retroactively annul this conversion in that particular case. Now, if we look at the wedding case that I'm talking about, this is used in order to try and prevent disaster. If you have a woman who is married, woman A marries man B, and she then has a child from man C. B and C are both Jewish, but she does not have a divorce, a get from man B. The child of the relationship between A and C is called a mamzer. To be a mamzer in Jewish law is very, very unpleasant. because you are restricted in all sorts of things. Most significantly, you can't marry another Jewish person unless it happens to be a mamzeret. So it's massively problematic. So the rabbis go absolutely out of their way to prevent somebody being designated as a mamzer. So one of the techniques they do is they look for a reason to retroactively annul the marriage between A and B. So if A and B's marriage was not a proper marriage, then the issue from A and C is not a mamzer. Got it? So one of the things they do, and I've heard this said, and I really, really, really hope this isn't true, but I've heard it said that when non-frum, or whatever that means, couples get married, sometimes the rabbis bring a witness, one of the Adim, who might be a bit dodgy.
Yeah.
And so therefore, later on, when it all goes wrong, they can come along and say, this marriage between A and B was never a proper marriage because one of the witnesses was dodgy. And therefore, so listen, if that happens and they manage to find their way out of it, then that's a wonderful thing because you haven't got a mamzer. But I wouldn't like to think that they do it lechatchila, that they bring a dodgy witness in the first place in order to.
It's well known that this happens.
Yeah,
John.
I know. But I'm trying.
They'll say
I'm trying very hard to be
one,
done the kaf zechus here, David.
one of the Adim isn't Shomer Shabbos. But have a look. I'm sure you've seen it anyway, John. In the art scroll, near the bottom of note 42, it's describing exactly what we've just been talking about.
Yes, I'm going to come to that in a minute,
Okay.
David. Yeah. So, how did we get onto retroactive annulment? Oh, that was Julia's thing. Yeah. No, you can't unconvert somebody. Well, okay. Let's take Julia's scenario. She's a nice frum girl. She's a captive woman. She's a nice frum girl. She gives birth to Avshalom, and then she goes off the derech and she's unconverted. Then what's David messing around with her for then? When he conceives, he didn't know, so he conceives. Nah, I don't think it works.
Johnny, halacha l'maisa, someone that goes through a conversion that isn't genuine, they step straight out of the mikveh, come out, and go straight into Mackie D's. Can that conversion be invalidated?
I don't think it can, because what you can't say is that the Bashat Hatavila, at the time she went into the mikveh, all that it requires for a woman to convert is two things: Kabbalat Ol Malchut Shamayim, to accept upon herself the Torah, and that she will accept upon herself to keep the Torah to the best of her ability, and Tvila. So just as we have this concept, as you probably know, according to the halacha, somebody who commits suicide should not be buried in a Jewish cemetery, or should be buried in a separate section of a Jewish cemetery. And in fact, we don't do that. Why don't we do it? Because we assume that at the very last minute, before Nebuch, this person, took their own life, they did tshuva, and they didn't want to commit suicide, and and it was too late. They couldn't get, they'd taken the pills already.
That wasn't the case in the previous generation.
No,
John.
It wasn't, but it is now.
50 years ago, you couldn't be buried in an Orthodox Beis Olam in England if you.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But today we invoke the idea that they may have done tshuva at the last minute. So the same concept applies to your case, David. We can't say, unless she says, you can ask her. And I think you can ask her, and you can say, this is a bit strange behavior. You've just gone to the mikveh, you've just become Jewish, and now you're going to McDonald's. What's the story? She might say, I thought it was kosher. But anyway.
There's a terminology I think the Gemarah uses of someone standing in the mikveh with a sheretz in their hand.
Yeah, that's right. Tovel b'sheretz b'yadai. Yeah. If you go into the mikveh this is not for conversion. You go into the mikveh because you're tamei, because you're impure, because you've touched a sheretz. Sheretz is one of the creepy animals that give you tumah. So what's the point of going into the mikveh if you've still got the sheretz in your hand? It's called tovel b'sheretz b'yado. It's worthless. It's pointless. So if it turns out that when she went in the mikveh and you ask her and you say, wait a minute, that's a bit odd. When you went in the mikveh 5 minutes ago, did you accept the Torah or did you intend to come straight out and go into the McDonald's? If she says, I intended to do it, well, then it wasn't. You haven't annulled the conversion. It just wasn't a conversion in the first place. Let's go back to our question. How does it work with the? Let's do the first part first, and that is, how could Tamar be conceived when her mother was not Jewish, be born when her mother was Jewish, and still be not considered to be David's child? Well, the answer is not very satisfactory. Well, the fact is that many of the rabbis asked the question, and that's good enough for me, because what it means is that it's a good question, right? The answers are nowhere near as good as the question. And it's clear from the answers that the rabbis are struggling with this question, and they've done their best to, wheedle the way out of it, because, they've got to try, but they're not particularly satisfactory. Let me go through a few of the answers that I managed to find. So it seems that there are some opinions that make a distinction between yichus and Jewish and halachic Jewish status. So in other words, for example, somebody born to a Jewish mother is a Jewish child. Potentially, if you are conceived, if the father conceives that child when the mother was not Jewish, the connection between the father and the child was performed prior to the mother being Jewish. Are you with me? The father had nothing to do with the birth. The mother had everything to do with the birth. The mother nurtured this child for 9 months in a womb, etc., and went through labor and gave birth to the child. But the father, once he's done the conceiving, once he's done the act of conception, what's he got to do with it? Nothing. So the only connection between the father and the child was at a time when the woman was not Jewish. And therefore, there is an opinion, it's a minority opinion, but there is an opinion that says, whilst the child is Jewish to all intents and purposes, there is a break in the connection between the child and the father. It's not halacha l'maisa actually today, because if that was the case, you'd have all sorts of problems when it came to Yerusha, when it came to inheritance, all sorts of difficulties. So it isn't the halacha, but it's an opinion that's brought in order to try and square this situation. We don't have to have halacha l'maisa here, because what we're talking about here is the Eshet Yefat To'ar, this captive woman, which doesn't exist today. So it doesn't matter that this isn't halacha l'maisa. This is really an academic exercise of the rabbis trying to square an anomaly which we have in the Gemarah, which is, it's part of how the Gemarah works. It's part of the beauty of Gemarah. Or if you're like me, when I was a lot younger, not so much now, I've got much more patience for it. But when I was a lot younger, I would get terribly frustrated with these, what I used to call kvetched answers of the Gemarah. and I would, you know, I would just, I can't be doing that. That's bloody nonsense. I'm not having any of that. But actually, now I've got older and a little bit more tolerant, it's actually an interesting exercise to try and find ways out of this conundrum. So that's one way out, that there is a difference between halachic Jewishness and what we call yichus, legal lineage. The Rambam clearly rules like this. The Rambam says, and if you want to look it up, it's in Surah Biyah 13:14. He says that if a man marries a woman who converted or was a freed maidservant, their children are Jewish, but may not have the same halachic familial relationships as born Jews. For instance, and he says, a father and daughter may not be considered halachically related for incest laws, despite being biologically related. Now, that's not the Rambam giving a green light to incest between a father and a daughter. What it is doing is making life easier for a father and a daughter in the laws of yichud. Okay? Because if we had a situation where this was halacha lamaisa, that the father and daughter, like we're trying to say here, David and Tamar were not related, which is what we're trying to get to in the Gemarah, then if we had that situation lamasa, then in that situation, a father would not be allowed to be alone with his own daughter because he wouldn't be related to her, and therefore it would be yichud. Are you with me? So you have to understand what the Rambam is trying to get at here. He's not trying to say it's okay for a father and daughter in that scenario to have incest. Of course not. What he's trying to say is you can be lenient when it comes to yichud. Really interesting. So that's one opinion. Another opinion, which is probably the best opinion of all, is that the Yefat To'ar is a special case. It's a unique thing, and you cannot draw any conclusions halachically from it because it's a special case. And this is what David was referring to at the bottom of this footnote in 42, that normally a forced conversion, as we've just spoken about, in order to have a valid conversion, it has to be done from free will. The woman has to go to the mikveh and has to say, when she says that bracha of tevilah, she has to have in her mind that she fully accepts the Torah to keep it to the best of her ability, right? Whatever that means. So you can't force somebody to convert. It's a bit like forcing somebody to give a get, right? We've got all these agunot, right? If you could force a husband to give a get, then we wouldn't have any agunot, would we? We'd just force him. But a get has to be given freely. And so that's why we've got the agunot problem, because if the fella comes into the beis din and you've got his arm up his back and you say, if you don't give her a get, I'm going to break your arm, then that get is not valid because he's doing it under duress. So they have to do all sorts of things so that he comes round to the idea that he will freely give his wife a get. You can't force a get and you can't force a conversion. What this footnote wants to say, in the words of the Minchas Chinuch, I think, yes, the Minchas Chinuch says that actually this Yefat To'ar was a special case and you could forcibly convert her. I don't know what that actually even means, to forcibly convert somebody. But I mean, I do know what it means because I've seen it. I've seen, and I've got a case right on at the moment where the husband wants the woman to convert and the woman wants to stay with the husband. And the husband says, if you don't convert, I'm not staying with you. And so she converts. That's forcible conversion. That's not really. She says, yes, 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 I want to do it. But she doesn't really. She just wants to stay with the husband, right? So maybe that's this whole thing. But according to the Minchat...
is it because he's the king, it's a special case?
No, it's not because he's a king. It's the Yefat To'ar case. Anybody can take Yefat To'ar and forcibly convert her. it's something that we can't really get our heads around, because it's anathema to us, because it goes against everything that we've ever learnt about conversion. But according to this footnote of the Minchas Chinuch, I'll read it to you. Although forcible conversion is not generally recognized in Torah law, the law of the beautiful captive stands as an exception to this rule, and the forcible conversion suffices to permit her Jewish captor to cohabit with her. Nevertheless, so long as she has not fully agreed to the conversion, she is in many respects not regarded as Jewish, and any child born by her before her willing acceptance of Judaism is not considered Jewish, which is a problem for us for the second question, because Avshalom was older than Tamar, and he is considered completely Jewish. So we now, that footnote does not solve our problem as far as the Avshalom problem is concerned. Okay, so the other explanation I found, before we go on to the Avshalom bit, the other explanation I found, which is probably the truth, is that, and I tried to find where this was from, and I couldn't find a decent source, but it says David may not have married her properly. According to some views, David violated the Fatwa process and married the woman improperly or prematurely, so their child Tamar did not have a clear yichus. The Gemara might be hinting that Tamar was halachically Jewish, but not halachically David's daughter, due to the flawed nature of the union. Still doesn't sort out our Avshalom problem, does it? So we're a bit stuck, really. So how about the Avshalom problem? How are we going to get around that? So first of all, let's just prove that Avshalom was older than Tamar. That is clear in the Tanakh itself. Avshalom is unquestionably treated as David's son. Let me show you chapter 18 of Shmuel Bet on the screen for you now. This is where Yoav kills Avshalom, and the king David mourns for him greatly. Where am I finding it here? No, this is the death of Avshalom. It's the next chapter. Beg your pardon. Here we go. Here we go. Look at this. Verse 1. Vayirgaz HaMelech, and then the king became very trembly. Vayal el aliyat hasha'ar, and he went up to the upper chamber. Vayef, and he cried. V'cho amar belechto, and he as he's going, he's crying out, Bani Avshalom, Bani Avshalom, mi yitain moti, ani tachtecha, Avshalom, Bani. Right, let me translate that for you. My son Avshalom, my son Avshalom. I would rather have died instead of you, O Avshalom, my son. Is there any doubt in your minds that Avshalom is his son? I think not. You know, I think that's as great a proof as we'll get. Now, as we've said, if Avshalom is the son of David and Tamar is his younger sister, we've got a problem. So how do we get around that problem? Well, ladies, close your ears for a second. One opinion is that there is a difference between girls and boys, that, obviously boys are considered to be children and girls are not considered to be children at all.
Which explains why he wasn't that upset about Tamar being raped.
Possibly. There we go. That's one of the opinions, so again, political versus halachic. Avshalom was socially and politically David's son, but not halachically. So he says this particular opinion, which was Rav Yoel ben Nun, says that it's all a whole legal loophole that Gemarah Sanhedrin is saying here. And the bottom line is that nobody can find a proper answer because there isn't a proper answer. And our questions were very good questions, and there isn't really a proper answer. And we have stumped the Gemarah. And if we were rewriting the Gemarah, we would have one word here, which would be, David?
Whitewash.
No, teku. Teku.
Yeah.
Teku. Teku means we don't know. We'll have to wait until Eliyahu Navi comes with Mashiach and give us the answer to all these conundrums. If you see teku in the Gemarah, it's not that common, but if you see teku in the Gemarah, it means that's it. We haven't got an answer. And despite all the acrobatics that the Gemarah does. So fascinating questions. And it's, you know, let's recognize it for what it is. The questions were better than the answers, but it was a good exercise in seeking answers, and interesting to see how people do try to come round to it. But in all truthfulness, none of them really satisfy all of it, and we do end up with a square peg in a round hole. Yes, David. After David, we'll move on to the Gemarah.
Yeah. I know we'll cover this at length in the Tanakh share once we get to it, but take a look at an explanation from a modern Israeli Bible critic from the Koren. If you got it there, Johnny, the Koren to Shmuel, page 309.
309. Yes, we're only up to page 267 in our Tanakh, so we've got a little while to go before we get to 309.
On this article, incest and rape, go from the middle of the second column where it says incest stories in the Tanakh.
Okay, let's read it out. Incest stories in the Tanakh are mainly described in the book of Genesis. And he gives some quotes. In the context of the story before us, it is important to note Abraham's testimony that Sarah, his wife, is his father's daughter, i.e. sister, and not his mother's. But despite what we see in the story of Abraham and Sarah, Torah law forbids incest of varying degrees, including between brother and sister or half-sister. Quotes Sefer Vayikra Achrei Mot, which we read on Yom Kippur. It is not coincidental that the Torah shows awareness of the Egyptian practice of incest. With regard to Amnon's relationship with Tamar, Tamar's plea that Amnon asked for her hand from their father David indicates an unfamiliarity with the Torah's prohibitions. We never thought of that, did we? We never thought that Tamar didn't know the halacha.
We did last week. Last week we suggested that. Yeah.
Carry on, Johnny. It gets even more interesting.
Reflecting instead the norms of the Tanakh in the patriarchal age. So in other words, Tamar, I think we did, you're right, Tamar will have taken her lead from Tanakh. We mentioned Dinah and Shimon, didn't we, last week? As well as the norms that were prevalent in the ancient Near East, Elam and Egypt, and perhaps also Babylon and Asia Minor. Hence, Amnon's crime was rape, not incest. In both ancient Near Eastern and Torah law, the rapist of a virgin girl who was not engaged was obligated to marry her. However, Amnon did not take Tamar to be his wife, and it is not mentioned in verse 21 that he was punished by David. That's what Julia just said. Although the Septuagint adds that, but he did not rebuke his son Amnon, but he favored him since he was his firstborn, an attestation that Amnon deserved punishment. This story thus indicates that rape is a severe offense, even more so when the victim is the half-sister of the rapist. So, very good. So, that's probably an explanation of why Tamar said what she said. It's not what the Gemarah is trying to do. The Gemarah is trying to make her not into a daughter of David. But she probably didn't know the halacha. And she was taking her lead from Sefer Bereshit. Excellent. Thank you for pointing that out. Right, let's go to the Gemarah and let's move on because we have some rather interesting stuff to get through today. Right, we stopped over here. Can you see the Gemarah? We're on page 123 if you're in the Steinsaltz. Bottom of Chof Aleph, Omed Aleph, if you're in the Vilna Shas. And the last thing we said here in the Gemara was Amar Rav Yehuda, that he was an Ish Chacham L'Risha. We had a discussion last week, didn't we? How you can be wise in an evil way or wise in a good way, evil genius. You know, all the Bond movies have an evil genius, don't they? We spoke about that. Now, the next bit of the Gemara takes us back to the story of Amnon and Tamar. I think probably we need to go to that. Let me just go and show you the Gemara, the Parsha first of all, the Tanakh. There we go. That's now the Tanakh on here. Remember Yonadav, this fellow Yonadav, said to him, lie down on your bed, verse 5, top of the page, lie down on your bed, feign sickness, and when your father comes to see you, say to him, let my sister Tamar come now and let me give me bread to eat and prepare the food before my eyes, that I may see and eat from her hand. Okay, so now, what's the obvious question here that the Gemara is going to ask?
David must have thought it very odd.
What? Yeah, why is it odd?
Well, why would this request be made of David? It's not the done sort of thing.
Yeah, normally, if a prince is ill and he's lying in his bed and he wants food, where would they get food from?
Servants.
The palace kitchen, right? The palace kitchen would make the food and they'd send it along, you know, on one of them silver trays with one of them big silver thingy-majigs, then, you know, and they'd take the top off and you'd have that, you know, whatever it was that they'd made him. And they'd send it in from the palace kitchens. What's he asking here? He's got Yonadav's ruse. He's got to get Tamar into the bedroom in order for him to rape her. So he says, let Tamar come and make the food before my eyes. That's what's strange about this request, right? What's wrong with the food from the palace kitchen? David would say. Right? That's
it came from the GHF.
Let's not go there. Right. So somehow or other, Amnon has to get Tamar into his bedroom, and it's a strange request that she should come and make food for him in front of him. So that's what the Gemara is asking. The Gemara has picked up on this and said, this is a bit strange. Let's go to the Gemara. You got the Gemara now?
Yeah.
Vayomer madua ata kacha dal ben hamelech. Vayomer lo Yonadav shchav al mishkavcha vehitchal. Lie on your bed and pretend to be ill, etc. Va'asta le'inai et habirya vatikach hamashret vatitzok lefanav. And she should make this food in front of my eyes, le'inai, in front of my eyes. And what did she do? She took the masret, which is this pan, vatitzok lefanav, and she poured it out before him. Amarav Yehuda Amarav. This is our same fellow, remember? Amarav Yehuda Amarav is the one that's been saying all of this stuff up till now. Yes, Julia?
I'm just wondering whether this does indicate and confirm that men are treated differently from women, because she is, well, would you expect a princess to be asked to perform these tasks?
Good question. Good question. I don't know. You may be right, because the answer is that is not, and I had this similar sort of question, but not in the same way, actually. But let's just see what he says. Amarav Yud Amarav. She'asta lo mine tigun. Tigun. What's tigun? If you go to a restaurant and they ask you, when you order your burger, if the waitress asks you whether you want batzal metugnan, what is she offering you?
Fried onions.
Fried onions. How did you know that, Avril?
I can speak a bit of Ivrit.
It's not that you like fried
I
onions on
don't
your
like
burgers.
fried onions. I hate them.
How can you not like fried onions? What are you, some kind of Sephardi? All Ashkenazim love fried onions. Right. So yes, matugnan means fried. So she was making fried food for him. And what's the big deal about fried food? Fried food.
So it's supposed to be not well.
Yeah, you're
Not
right.
good
Shouldn't
for
be eating
somebody,
fried food.
yeah.
No wonder he's not well.
Yeah.
What do you get? What do you get when you're not well? You get a poached egg and soda water. That's what I got when I was not well. Yeah, poached egg on toast without any butter is enough to make you not well. But he had fried food. But what's the thing about fried food?
You need a flame. You've got to have a gas. You need a flame.
You need a flame, and it cools down very quickly. You ever been to a fancy restaurant where they bring the flambéed food there, and it's still flaming up when they bring it to your table? Yeah, that's you get the best steak I've ever had in my life was in a restaurant in Johannesburg called Mutsuyan on the Square. I think it's closed down now. It was magnificent, and it was brought to the table flaming with a flame coming up. It was apart from that, that was beautiful, but it was brilliant. And this is what he had. He wanted it hot. If you fry something in the palace kitchens and send it over with some schleppy servant, even if you cover it with one of them thingamajigs, it's going to be cold by the time you get there. So Amnon says, I don't want cold food. I want her to come and make it in front of my eyes. My question was, why did it have to be her? Could have sent the servant to do that. Could have sent the chef. And Julia's question makes my question even greater. And that is, what you're asking for a princess to do it for? And I suppose you have to, you could say that, she's my favorite sister, which she certainly was. At least at this point, she was his favorite sister. And he wanted her to come and cook it for him because she was his favorite sister. I don't know the answer.
You're ill and you want to slap up meal when you're ill?
Well, he wasn't really ill, was he? He was only pretending. He was pretending. So anyway, that's what Rav Yehud's Rav picks up on, this idea that he didn't need to have it made in front of his eyes. And interestingly, Rav Yehud Rav does not pick up on the fact that he asked Tamar to do it and not the chef. Maybe indicating that Julia is right, that the women, the princess, is not considered to be on the same level as even the chef. Maybe,
particularly if she's the daughter of the Ishay Fatah.
Yeah, she's not even a proper princess. Yeah, correct. This whole, we know that David. Well, we assume that David isn't all that bothered about this rape because we don't hear anything in the pshat, do we, about David? And in fact, David is upset when Amnon is killed. Who kills Amnon in the end?
Avshalom.
Avshalom. Why?
Revenge.
Because
of the rape.
Because
his father didn't do anything.
Because Tamar is his full sister, and as David said, because his father didn't do anything. What does that remind you of?
Shimon and Levi.
Shimon and Levi. Dinah was raped by Hamor, by Shechem, right? What does Yaakov do?
Nothing.
He waits for the boys to come back. Shimon and Levi go in and do the business. And Yaakov does what?
Tells them off.
Tells them off. And what do they say back to him?
Hachazonah yaseh tachotenu.
Hachzonah yaseh achotenu. Will you make our daughter into a prostitute? In other words, they give it back to Yaakov for not doing anything. Same story over again. Avshalom sees David does nothing to Tamar. Sorry, does nothing to Amnon, and he takes the law into his own hands. David is not happy at all with Avshalom. So it's clear that David is not so bothered about Tamar. So maybe it is because he's not his proper daughter. She, it all begins to fit in a little bit. Anyway, that is the end of that. Except it's not, because let's go on in the pasuk in Shmuel Bet. Okay, so he has his evil way with her. Over here, verse 14, she says, don't do this thing. He didn't listen. He would not heed her. He overpowered her and forced her and lay with her. He raped her. Next pasuk. Bearing in mind that he's been lovesick for this girl for months, so much so that his mate Yehonadab said, "What's the matter with you? You're thin. You've not eaten for months." And immediately after he's done the act, next words, Vayisna'eha Amnon sin'ah gedola ma'od. He hated her with such a hatred. Ki gdola hasina asher sne'ah me'ahava asher ahava. He hated her that much that he hated her more than he'd even loved her before. You can't get any clearer indication than this pasuk of his feelings for Tamar at this point. Now, what is going on in this pasuk? Why did he hate her so much? Before we go to the Gemarah, which is going to give us a bizarre explanation for this hatred, I want to ask you all, if you have looked into the Gemarah, I'll know, because you can't possibly guess what the Gemarah is going to say. So if you tell me the Gemarah's answer, I'll know that you've cheated. So give me your thoughts on why immediately after the act does he hate her so much?
Because he hates himself.
No,
Because he hates himself.
maybe
Yeah.
because he never did the act.
Because he never did the act.
Hmm.
But it says he did. It says it clearly. Vaya'aneha vayishkav ota. He raped her and he lay with her. He did do the act.
Well,
Maybe
now he knows he's got to marry her, really. By law, he's got to marry her.
Okay, let's just develop that a minute, Jackie. By law, he's got to marry her. Where are you getting that from?
From halacha.
Okay, you're quite right. The halacha says that a man who rapes a girl who is not betrothed to another man, what's the halacha, Jackie?
He has to marry her.
He has to marry her. So why would that make him hate her? He just loved her a minute ago.
Maybe it was disappointing for him that she wasn't what he had thought. She was just like anybody else. Maybe it was.
So she wants the good in the sack. Is that what you say?
And not necessarily. She was human. He'd obviously had her on a pedestal, and this love had been going on, as you said. So she was something totally special, and he realised she really wasn't so special after
Okay, so
all.
she's not so special, so he doesn't love her so much, but to
He
hate
didn't
her
want
with
to
such a passion.
didn't want to marry her, and he knew that was what would have to happen. He'd be stuck with her, maybe.
Okay. Before I come back to Julia, anybody else got an idea? Any ideas?
She's still got to come out in the open.
Maybe that's the truth. He knows that he's now gone and done it, hasn't he?
Well, it didn't affect Tamar so much as she says, "Oh well, now we've got to get married, so it can't have been as bad. The rape can't have been as bad as one would have thought."
I think it all boils down to what Julia said. This is what we call in psychology transference. Okay, transference. I don't know if this has ever happened to you. It certainly happened to me. You have a little bit of a tiff with the missus, right? And you stomp off upstairs in a bad mood, and you spend a little bit of time up there, you know, cogitating and smouldering. And then you go back downstairs, you stomp back downstairs, and she's there in the kitchen giving you the cold shoulder, giving you the silent treatment. And you say, why are you in such a bad mood then? When actually, who's in the bad mood?
Yeah.
You're in the bad mood, right? It's called transference. You're laughing, Julie. I don't know if you've ever done that or been the victim of it. I don't know. But I've certainly done it, right? I've certainly done that. And as I'm doing it, I know I'm transferring. It's called transference. I'm transferring my own feelings onto somebody else. And it's a well-recognized psychological concept that we all do, or some of us do, transference. And that's what's going on here. He's done this act, which he knows was a terrible thing to do. And immediately, he hates himself for it. I'm not going to ask you to put your hands up for this, but I wonder if any of you have ever done anything which you know is wrong. And immediately after you've done it, you think, shouldn't have done that. Shouldn't have done that. Really feel really bad straight away. I don't know, maybe what it is, you know, eating a piece of tray for meat or something. I don't know, whatever it might have been, right? And you feel so bad. You sort of hate yourself for it. And he transferred that hatred onto her because he'd done this thing that was so bad that he hated himself so much. Look at the pasuk. He hated her with a hatred that was gedolah, great, but not just gedolah, gedolah ma'od, very great. And not only that, it was greater than the love that he had for her before. He hates himself so much that he can't bear it. So what do you have to do if you can't bear it? You have to twist it round somehow. And he transferred this hatred onto her. That is how when I read this pasuk for the first time, that is how I understood this hatred. I thought it was really clear to me that this was a case of transference of psychological hatred for yourself for doing such a terrible act. And you transferred that hatred onto the recipient of that act, who you know full well was entirely innocent of that act because you forced it upon her.
I think that must be correct, because the other suggestions don't take into account that this was actually a rape. It wasn't consensual sexual relations. It couldn't be that she disappointed him. He raped her. She was unwilling.
Indeed, indeed. I think that probably, that possibly answers Avril's point. I mean, you know, listen, this is a strange thing to say, but maybe I'm strange. I don't know. I've never understood rape. It can't be much fun when, you know, somebody's screaming and shouting and you know, clearly does not want you to do what you're doing. How can that be satisfying? I just don't get it.
But, it's about power, isn't it a power thing?
It's about power. Maybe it's about power. I don't know.
You obviously haven't read lots of murder stories.
I'm not a rapist, so I can't get my head around it. But yeah, so I think that perhaps the disappointment in the whole thing, I don't know, that doesn't do it for me. But I think Julia is right. I think this is transference. The Gemarah thinks otherwise. We've only got 1 minute to go to the Gemarah before we're done. So let's just see what we can see in the Gemarah. We'll just get a little taster of it. So, Vayisna'eha Amnon sinag dola ma'od. The Gemarah quotes our pasuk, and Amnon hated her with an exceeding great hatred. My Tamar, why? What's the reason? Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzchak said, Nima nikshara lo. Rabbi Yitzchak says, while he raped her, a hair of hers, talking here about a pubic hair of hers, nikshara lo, became tied from the word kesher and knot, became tied around his penis and caused him to be one whose penis has been severed, va'asatu krut shafcha, and cut his penis in half. He
Right.
had his penis severed by her pubic hair. That is what the Gemarah says, the reason that he hated her. Now then, we are going to stop there because that is the end of the shiur. We've run out of time. And that is my
Please don't
technique.
give us any more homework. I don't want to.
That is my technique for making sure that you tune in next week, because we will carry on and see what on earth is going on in this very strange Gemara. Now you know what I meant when I said, if you told me what the Gemara said, that I know you would have cheated and looked on, because there's no way any of you could have imagined such a scenario. This raises all sorts of questions, and the Gemarah is going to go into this in some detail next week. So you are warned. We will be talking about severed penises and pubic hair in the Gemarah next week, and I will be very interested to see who shows up next week for this next installment. Any questions on today's rather interesting shiur?
It's not surprising he was disappointed by the encounter then. If
So there's a support for Avril's theory. Yes, quite so.
Enjoy it.
Okay. All right, everybody. Tonight, let me stop the recording.